comments, things that were done very well in the paper, and then 2 to 3 pushing feedback comments. And we tried to make sure I tried to make sure to stress that these weren't supposed to be negative, which some of the students wrote negative comments across the top of the paper, which kind of defeated the point. But so the students went through without doing anything and wrote down their initial comments and thoughts on the paper. And they also wrote a sentence about what they thought of the paper as a whole. From there, the students went into the editing part. So it says here things you're looking for. It says grammar, sentence structure, that probably says spelling. And then there were the 3 major things that you need for your thesis. You have clear, concise thesis, quote from each document, and then you have to analyze the quote from the document and talk about how the quote supports the thesis. This is the structure that they use in the 9th grade world history class. They also needed to make sure there was the point of view of the author. So the students were looking for different biases. And this seemed to go very well. They kind of had fun while they were doing it. And the grades overwhelmingly got better, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. So that was the intervention for assignment 2. And then for assignment 3, it was a choice assignment. They got to pick one of their 2 DBQs from before, and using the comments that their peers had wrote on the rough drafts, as well as my comments and the comments of my cooperating teacher who went through and wrote comments as well, they got to edit and revise their paper, and then they got to return it in and hopefully get a better grade. So it applies to the same SOL and NCSS standards and themes. I just kind of put them all up there for this one. And for this, the major intervention was they already had all of these comments. They got to use everything that they had. With every assignment, we were also available to meet during both lunch shifts, before school and after school. And we did have some students take advantage of that. Not nearly as many as I would have hoped, but that did seem very helpful to some of the students. Alright, so now I'm going to tell you particularly about my 2 students that I chose. The first student is Ann Scott. She was a relatively average student. She earned B's and C's in class, which isn't generally great for the honors class. I usually recommend that you go to the college level if you're earning C's. But she was sticking it out. Her major problems that I was hoping to fix were she didn't quite understand the structure of the DBQ. So she was missing steps. She didn't quite understand how to put it together, so I wanted to see if I could help her fix that. The other thing is she didn't quite understand the difference between analysis and summary. She would put in a quote from the document, and then she would tell me exactly what that quote said, and that was her analysis. So I wanted to work on that with her as well. And in the first assignment, that's where I kind of got these major issues from. She didn't do so well. She got a 50% on her first assignment, so not great. And so I really wanted to help her with this. The second assignment, she got the peer editing help that she needed, and there are comments all throughout her paper, as well as some of the structural issues that we had written on her first assignment that told her the exact structure that she needed to follow, which steps she was missing, so hopefully she could get it right for the second time. And she did. Her second paper was much stronger, particularly in the structure section. In her second assignment, her grade went up to an 85, so that was a 35% increase from the first one. She had all the different steps of the DBQ in there, and she didn't skip anything. She had sort of moved away from summary and into analysis. She was sort of crossing that line, but it still wasn't very good. So we're going to try and help focus on that for the next one. And that's not good. For her final paper, right before or the week before I handed out the third assignment, I also handed out a writing suggestions and tips worksheet and had a quick overview of what passive voice is and how to remove it from your paper, as well as having students not repeat the same things over and over again. I had several students who used the same phrases in 10 sentences in a row. So I was trying to teach them how to vary their word choices. And while I marked that on her paper and we went over it for about 10 to 15 minutes in class, on her third assignment, Ann Scott hadn't changed any of the passive voice or the repeated words issues, but she had worked on her analysis, and while it was very, very basic, she wasn't just summarizing the quote anymore, so that was helpful. And even though she had fixed her paper, and the percentage according to the rubric had gone up by about 5 points, at this point in the semester, we had decided that it would be helpful to include an extra part of a DBQ, which we didn't require before. It was called an expanded core requirement. And this is where we had hoped the students would be at. Ann Scott didn't quite get there, so her grade went from an 85 to about an 80 when we adjusted the rubric. So even though it was a little bit better with the extra requirements that the students were supposed to have achieved by the third one, she had not gotten there yet. And I made sure to write comments on her paper about how she would have to work on her analysis for next year if she wanted to be in the AP class. My second student is Tay. He was my English language learner. He was an above average student. He usually received all A's. Every once in a while he would get a high B. And his major issues were missing steps in the structure, so very similar to Ann Scott. And because he was an English language learner, he had some problems with his wording. Some of his sentences were a little bit awkward, and he had a lot of the repeated words and phrases. So I was going to try and help him remove some of the spelling and structural errors and try and help him with the repeated words. So for his first assignment, with the no intervention or anything, he received a 70, which was fairly low for him. He was a little bit surprised and dismayed. I met with him for lunch the next day, and we went over his paper, and he went comment by comment, and I showed him exactly what he needed to do to fix the things that he had gotten wrong, and it would help him in his next paper as well. He also came in after school a couple times with rough drafts, and we went over them as well. With the second paper, he went up to a 90, so that was a 20% increase. And he still had some of the issues with the writing, repeating words, and passive voice, but he had his structure, he had all the parts, and they were in the right order. So he had gotten this issue under control. So what we focused on after the second one was him changing his passive voice and making sure that he was varying up his different word choices and phrases. And for the third assignment, he chose to revise his second paper. And he really took my comments and suggestions to heart, and he removed passive voice from 40 different sentences, made his paper significantly stronger, and his grade remained it would have been the same with the expanded core. It went down to an 85. But it was a significantly better written paper, and he clearly understood the structure of the DBQ. His analysis was great. He needed to continue working on some of his English and sentence structure, but because he was an English language learner, we didn't focus too much on that. It was more of a, it wasn't getting deducted grade-wise, it was just marking it and having him work on it. So, for my findings, along with my two students that I chose, there was a significant grade in the majority of the changes. The interventions that I had with the peer editing and the writing suggestions handout really helped the students. Almost everyone's grade went up between the first and second one. Their writing structure greatly improved. We had a day where we wrote on the board as a class, what structure you went in. So you had your clear, concise thesis was in your thesis paragraph. You had your body paragraphs. My students told me exactly how you should order it. And they really seem to start getting this structure that's so important for them next year. I also had a great response to the passive voice suggestions handout. I kind of scared them a little by telling them that I had had professors that were very hard on passive voice in papers. The professor that I TA'd for last semester would drop your grade by 5 points every time you used 1 over 3, so I told them that. And I told them about another professor who your grade automatically dropped to a B if you used more than 2. So I kind of tried to scare them a little bit with the passive voice, and I think it worked. One girl came up and told me she got rid of every single one, which when I read her paper, she actually hadn't. That was okay. She only had like 2. So I really appreciated her effort because before she had used passive voice a lot. And then, like I said, with Tay, he did a great job and successfully removed passive voice from over 40 sentences. It was around 43. So I thought that those interventions were really successful in the students' writing, and they really increased their writing abilities while I was there. And the last thing, just kind of reflections on my goals and the benefit of these assignments. I think I reached most of them. Obviously, the students had a lot more that they could do, and I think that these assignments were very beneficial to them because they will be writing DBQs in the future, so it's important that they know how to properly write them. And this really helped their general writing skills, the removal of passive voice, correct grammar and sentence structure and spelling. When you have students misspelling response on the cover sheet of their DBQ, you try and get rid of things like that. And misspelling not only my cooperating teacher's name, but also mine. So we tried to fix that a little bit. But in the future, obviously, when I have my own classroom, I'll have a lot more time to work on this. So I would start with these things in the beginning of the year, and hopefully the students would be able to continue improving their skills even more. And I think that it was really a very beneficial assignment for them, and that I reached the majority of my goals, but I can always do better on them. I think that is my last one. So that is my growth through writing.